Okay, welcome everybody, good evening, and welcome to the Capstone conversation of the third annual Mid-Atlantic Political Intern Summit, MAPIS2020. My name is Ben Dworkin. I'm a professor at Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey, and the director of the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship, RIPPAC, the host of this summit. Now, over 230 students from more than 50 different high schools and colleges have participated in today's programming. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the sponsors who have helped us put it all together: New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, PSE&G, the New Jersey Utilities Association, Campbell Soup Company, GTB Partners, and First Energy. Now, for our capstone conversation, we are thrilled to have with us the Honorable Cory Booker, United States Senator from New Jersey. Welcome, Senator.
I'm so thrilled to be with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Senator, we reached out to students who, as they registered for this conference, and solicited the topics and questions that they wanted us to ask you. So we're just going to jump in and go through this. What do you consider the biggest challenge facing America today? And why, among all of America's challenges that it faces, why is the one that you selected really the top one?
So look, I have a deep and abiding faith in our country and the goodness of people. And if I start from that, I believe that we as a nation, when we come together, stand together, and build bridges across the many lines that divide us, race, religion, geography, and more. When we are actually a united country, there's nothing we can't do. And that spirit has helped us to do everything from map the human genome, beat the Nazis, go to the moon. When Americans are united, that's when we can take on the greatest challenges. And so I think the biggest challenge we face as a nation right now are deepening divides, where we often hate each other or dislike each other, and that undermines our ability to find common ground. And our adversaries globally know this. I am, in my position that New Jersey's afforded me, I get to read intelligence documents. Like for the Russians, for example, one of their main strategies is to do two things, is to pit us against each other. And they regularly go on, as well as some other nations, go on our social media platforms parading as Americans, trying to whip up hate, division, and divisiveness. And they also try to erode our faith in our institutions, the institutions we've built, whether it's our media or our government institutions. And so I've been trying with my public career to remind people that the lines that divide us are not nearly as strong as the ties that bind us, to try to make people understand that if you consider yourself a patriot, remember, patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. We don't always have to agree. Some days we don't always have to like each other. But love means that we understand that we have a common bond, that we need each other. Love understands that we have to sacrifice and serve each other, and that the only way forward is by deepening those bonds. And so that, to me, is now more than ever, I think, really the only real obstacle we have to go into this next century, leading the planets in terms of facing the problems that face humanity, from economic problems to all the way to things like climate change.
One of the ways that you tried to build those bridges and to remind the American people about that view and how to overcome that particular challenge was by running for president. And we had several questions from students about what was that like. Specifically, I wanted to ask you, when you ran for president, what surprised you?
Wow. Well, I started a campaign really from the space of your first question. Like, I was not running. I would tell people all the time, this election coming up is not a referendum on one guy in one office. It's a referendum on who we are and who we must be to each other. And a lot of folks told me that, oh, Cory, you're going to try to go out there and preach this gospel that the challenge of the day is to put more indivisible back into this one nation under God. And you're not going to find resonance. And the reality is we did. And that ideal really moved audiences. I remember one of the embedded reporters that was with me from, I think, CNN from the whole campaign, wrote this postmortem about our campaign, really about what she witnessed was that when people actually came and we talked, not letting certain people pull us down into hatred or bigotry or pull us down to disliking them, but remembering that light drives out light, not more darkness, drives out darkness, not more darkness, that you can't drive out hate with hate, you need love. And so I think what was affirming to me and surprising to a lot of folks was that there is an appetite in this country for goodness and decency. And I was just really pleased that even though I was in wildly geographically different areas, from the city of Des Moines to the rural areas of South Carolina, from big cities like Las Vegas to small towns in New Hampshire, that I was just so affirmed that I saw deeper than I ever have in my life those common bonds and those chords that strike to the spirit of our to the center of our souls and of all Americans. It made me really even more deeply fall in love with my country and really affirm the way I try to be a senator, which is to try to find commonality with my friends across the aisle to get big things done.
So just as a follow-up to that, what political lessons would you say you learned along the way, this being your first effort to seek the Democratic nomination for president? Were there certain lessons that you sort of took away from this whole experience?
You know, I think the best thing I can say for me, and I think it's true for life in general, and I hope that everybody, this is just, I think, a universal truth. Like, look, we knew when we started our election with 20 plus people running for president that that it was everybody had a long shot. There was no odds-on favorites when you have that, and anything can happen in a presidential election. And so the best political lesson I have seen, when things go right with me, I do it well. When things go wrong, I don't do it well, haven't done it well. But on this campaign, we just set out, we are going to be true to ourselves. We are going to run true to our purpose, regardless if it means whether I can get that position, because life is about purpose. It's not about positions. And I think that my team, the team I built around me, we felt so proud of the campaign we built and ran because we stayed true to a purpose and a theme. As a reporter would always say to me, it's really clear why you're running. You're not just trying to shape yourself to fit what you think the voters want. And I think that's folly. I think you put your truth out there and do it as boldly and as fearlessly as you possibly can. And if you don't achieve some specific position, I'm telling you, in the long run, as I went back to the Senate floor and had a colleague on the other side of the aisle even say to me, he goes, gosh, you ran a campaign that the country needed, even if the primary electorate didn't seem to want it. And I think that in the long span of your life, having a purpose-driven life is going to serve you so much better. And in my politics, which means for me, my politics serves a larger purpose as I serve New Jersey, I think I returned after my presidential race with a lot of respect and better position to deliver significantly for New Jersey and for the nation on big issues, whether it's, you know, ascending to the leadership of policing issues in the Senate, ascending to the leadership of other critical issues that help our economy in the Senate. So I'm really excited about just getting this massive affirmation that in life, the more authentic you are, people feel that. And it's going to take you a lot longer than some kind of craven desire to be everything that you think that people want. And then in the way, you lose yourself.
I appreciate that insight. We obviously had several questions about the tremendous amount of social unrest that has been going on throughout the country since the killing of George Floyd. So I just wanted to ask you, I mean, there's a lot there, but let me try and break it down this way. What's your take on the street protests that we continue to see around the country, the occasional looting and defacement of public property that some cities face, and the responses that we've seen both from local government and the federal government to these protests? Can you just sort of give us your perspective on what's happening here?
Well, first of all, our founders knew that protest is a fundamental element of our great nation. We were founded in protest and marching. I mean, the first a bullet taken in America, Crispus Attucks, was a massive part of a massive protest movement. The Boston Tea Party was a pretty radical step to seize tea and throw it over the ship. So that element is a big part of us, and our founders tried to enshrine those ideals, from freedom of speech, the right to petition your government. It is a essential ideal. Now, obviously, violence and the destruction of property is unacceptable, and there are consequences, and there should be consequences for that kind of behavior. But fundamentally, what we're seeing right now is the largest social protests, amongst the largest social protests in our nation's history. And we should all take heart in that, in the sense that every major stride of our ancestors towards our common ideals has been preceded by mass protest. From the suffrage movement, which was a lot, in fact, we in Jersey should be proud. The very first person arrested in front of the White House was Alice Paul, who was, she was protesting for suffrage in front of the White House, was arrested, and then before Gandhi went on a hunger strike and was horribly tortured, but force-fed. But it continued from there. The workers' rights that we take for granted were achieved through strikes and protests, mass movements. We know from Stonewall all the way through LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender protests and marches. We know through the civil rights movement. We just celebrated John Lewis for doing the kind of marches and sit-ins and freedom rides that he did. Think about every major piece of legislation, from the granting of suffrage to many of the antitrust legislation, to the Voting Rights Act, which was a direct result of Bloody Sunday and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So we should think to ourselves, when have I saw an issue so important that I was willing to march for it? Am I honoring our traditions of what got us here by doing a climate change protest, doing a police reform protest, doing a gun safety protest? And so I feel this sense of pride, and I know as a person, as a chief author of police accountability legislation, that legislation that I wrote that passed the House of Representatives and has darn near 40 senators on co-sponsoring it wouldn't have been possible before the protests took the streets. And so we are in a nation where we know we are not, we haven't achieved our ideals. It is flatly, it is demonstratable by evidence. Like, for example, there's no difference in America between blacks and whites for using marijuana, smoking marijuana, selling marijuana, no difference. Blacks, whites, Latinos, we all have the same rates of usage and sale. And I saw it when I was at elite institutions, college campuses. We know there's smoking and selling of marijuana. And we know people are still getting arrested. 2017, there were more marijuana arrests in America than all criminal, violent crime arrests combined. But then you look back and say, who was arrested for it? Overwhelmingly, it is low-income people. And we know, as Brian Stevenson says, one of my great heroes in America, we have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. And then we know black and brown people dramatically, about 4 times more likely to get criminal convictions for nonviolent drug crimes. And so that is by the data shows that we live in a country that your color of your skin, in fact, the best predictor of whether you live around toxic environments, breathe dirty air, drink dirty water, is the color of your skin. Whether you get adequate prenatal care or not is the color of your skin. So as long as race is a defining indicator of everything from healthcare to our economy to even the recovery efforts we're doing now. Mm-hmm. One of the studies on PPP grants and loans, they actually, one of the oversight groups did something simple, just took a black person and a white person walking into a bank for a PPP loan, same exact data, same exact background of the business, everything, dramatically different treatment. As long as that is still an issue, we as America, all of us are responsible for doing something about it, because we have one destiny in America. there's data now that's come out. If Black Americans got the same access to capital as white Americans and entrepreneurs and the like, our whole economy would see $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion more growth to our GDP, which would create incredible jobs and opportunity for more. And this is the kicker. If we don't deal with this issue of race, the other countries that we compete with that don't leave kids on the sidelines, in a global knowledge-based economy, the greatest natural resource a nation has is the genius of our children. And so the country that best cultivates that genius and prepares that next generation is the country that does the best. Well, a lot of our competitors are not seeing such disparate impact affecting large percentages of their population. No, they're creating mass opportunity in a way that we're not right now. And so the more we do this, the better we're competitive. As a guy that played football out at Stanford, I wouldn't say, okay, these 4 members of our team, they're not going to get shoes and cleats when they go on the field. I mean, that'd be crazy. There's no way we're going to beat the Notre Dame defense unless we get everybody well equipped and ready to fight. And so this is a national issue that we still have to focus on. And so many of the people out there protesting are saying things that, as a former guy who ran a police department, that the police are saying. When I met with the head of FBI in New Jersey about gang issues, and he gave me all this gang intelligence, I said to him, how do we solve this problem? And he looked at me perplexed by the question. He goes, we don't solve this problem. In other words, law enforcement doesn't deal ultimately with solving the problem of gang violence. It's going to be by us being a more compassionate society that invests in our children, that gets rid of lead poisoning, which addles the brain and undermines the executive function, by dealing with poverty and all the things that create the conditions in which violence happens. And so that is the larger moment we're in America. And I'm so happy that we see mass movements, not of Black people, multicultural movements of Americans beginning to say, you know what, for the sake of our nation, we've got to deal with this persistent injustice.
I'm glad you brought up, you sort of mentioned at the end there, poverty, because one of the signature issues from your presidential campaign was something that became known as baby bonds, a guaranteed savings account for every child born in America, started by the federal government, that would then be built up over time. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this. Just for a couple minutes, can you talk about how your baby bonds proposal would work? Why is this necessary? And how do you answer those critics who would claim that the annual price tag, which has been reported to be some $60 billion a year, makes it too expensive to even try?
Well, first of all, I love a chance to talk policy wonkiness with one nerd to another nerd. And I'm so happy you asked me that question. So let's just start with the big picture. We in America, our capitalist society, wealth is what gets people ahead. Paychecks gets people by, but wealth helps to get people ahead. And we have a tax system. You called the price tag for this idea $60 billion. We have a tax system that spends more than 10 times that, between $600 and $700 billion. We use our tax code to give tax expenditures to wealthy people to create more wealth. What are some of those examples? Well, carried interests is a tax expenditure. The mortgage interest deduction, something I believe in. We in New Jersey love that, but it overwhelmingly is used by people that make $200,000 or more. And even accounts that help incentivize savings, from college savings accounts that already have discounts on them, overwhelmingly used by people that have wealth. We help you get more wealth. So we shift over $600 to $700 billion to wealthy people to help them get wealthier through our tax code. We do nothing through our tax code, or very little through our tax code, to help people without wealth to get wealth. So why not take about 10% or less of that tax expenditure and create a fundamental idea that says every child born in America gets a savings account with $1,000 and it can't touch it till you're 18 or older. And every year, based upon your parents' income, you get upwards of $2,000. Now, we have 1 in 6 children born in poverty. So 1 in 6 children would get the full amount, which means compounding interest. Everybody would get a lot of money, kids, but the poorest kids, the lowest income children, would have upwards of $50,000. That's real wealth. And they could only use that to do things that create wealth in America, buying a home, going to college. Think about the students at Rowan, for example, that if they did not have to worry about college, a debt when they come out, that's a wealth building opportunity. Now, people that study this, yeah, it has a $60 billion price tag, but they say, number one, it would create a level playing field. It would collapse the racial wealth gap in America. It would, I mean, the people that have endorsed it are so curious, like the home builders of America are like, please do this, because we would see that area of our economy stimulated. So all I'm just saying is our tax code reflects our values. And right now our tax code, God, it makes it easy for people with wealth to compound that wealth. But for those Americans that don't, about 40% of Americans that don't have wealth in terms of that savings, it begins to level the playing field and give everybody a chance to better participate in this free market economy that we have.
We have several students on this call who, I mean, these are very motivated, politically active folks, and they want to serve through politics, perhaps through elected office. They see you as a young person who started young and ran for office as an example. So can you talk perhaps broadly about some of the intangible traits, some of the characteristics that you believe most help a young person excel in a career in politics, and specifically in elected office?
Well, look, I had the audacity as a 20 in my 20s to run for an office, a city council seat, when I became the youngest person ever elected in our municipal elections in Newark, New Jersey. And obviously this city goes back to the, centuries. And I mean, I look back at myself now as a 28-year-old, and what was I thinking? But you know what? If you look back to the founders of our country, just Google it. How old were those founders? You'll be stunned. I mean, we celebrate people like Alexander Hamilton. We think they're like 35, 40. No, these people were in their 20s and amazed, stunningly young. And so the first thing is get it out of your head that you are not qualified to be an elected official, and just get that fear or that humility out of yourself. If you feel a calling, jump in, get involved. And so that's the first thing I would say, because I had all this self-doubt when I started, all this lack of belief. And I was blessed to have older mentors in Newark, not only that shoved me off the cliff to see if I could fly or not, but then were with me on the way down to teach me how to fly. And they basically said that, I ran against a guy 40 years older than me, God bless his soul. And we outworked him. We went out and knocked on thousands and thousands of doors. And so work, and plus ambition, plus the last thing I've already mentioned is, what is your purpose? If your purpose is just to be in elected office, I'm not really interested. I'm not turned on. I remember sitting with a bunch of college students once, and we were going around, and I was asking them, what do you want to do when you get older? One person says, I want to be president of the United States. And the next person right next to them said, I don't know what I want to do, but I really want to help children. And just started going on about the cause of kids in this country and the dire straits we're in. And I just used the two of them as an example. I was like, if you just want to be president of the United States, I'm telling you, you're going to warp your soul just to hold on to that position. It's going to suddenly become more important about you and that office than what your purpose is. If your purpose is to help kids in every step of the way, you are focused on that. There might be a day that you say, I can't stay in this office, but you're going to achieve your purpose much more. If you walk into my office in Washington, D.C., I don't like pictures of myself or my name on walls or whatever. To me, it's just great people I respect. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King. But the one thing I keep all the time is the map of the Central Ward of Newark that I used, the very map actually that I used that used to have writings all over it. It's the map I used in that race when I was 28 years old, because I hold it up as a symbol. The first people to take a chance on me, and I'm not from Newark, I'm from Harrington Park, New Jersey in Bergen County. These are folks took a risk on some young kid and put their faith in me. And I hold that map up to always center myself about what my purpose is and why I first ran for an office back in 1998. And so that's what I'm saying, being purpose driven. And if your purpose aligns with a position, God, go for it. And don't let anybody outwork you. Don't let anybody tell you you're too young. Don't let anybody tell you to wait your turn. Go for it. And if you lose, and I've lost elections spectacularly. In fact, one piece of advice is if you're going to run for office and have a spectacular failure, have a documentary team there to capture it.
That helps. That helps.
Because the documentary Street Fight, which actually got nominated for Academy Award and then lost to March of the Dagnap Penguins. So it's a two-time loser. But I've lost elections. That's okay. You learn so much more from your losses than you do from your wins. Get back up, dust yourself off, see if the purpose aligns with the position again, and then go for it again.
Let me just ask you, we got just a couple more minutes, and so let me just ask you this last final question. And it's a little bit related to what we just talked about, but what do you know now about politics, and in more particular about life, that you wish you knew when you were an undergrad? I mean, you've obviously picked up things since you were an undergrad, and we know your history, but what do you wish someone had told you back then when you were 20, 21 years old, that now you know?
So I just want to say first, it's mostly stuff in your personal life, your own personal journey. And I wish that knucklehead that I was in my relationships and things like that. And maybe that's a good way of putting it, which is, look, I've always had this strident, almost defiant belief in our country, and that produces a lot of dissatisfaction. That we would have a nation, the richest on the planet, that has such high levels of poverty. That we'd have a nation, richest on the planet, that would have the highest rates of, premature births and maternal mortality. I can go through things that I find offensive, I find obscene, and that drives me. I don't want to lose that. I want my 20-year-old self, my 30-year-old self, my 40-year-old self to just continue to be driven by a love for this country. And as my mom was, who loved me so much, but would get very dissatisfied if I wasn't living up to my promise. I think it was James Baldwin says, I love my country so much that I insist upon the right to criticize it. As my mom did to me, pull up your pants, comb your hair. I used to have beautiful hair, by the way. So I just want to tell you on your personal life is, I have really found that life is about moments, hour to hour. And if you focus on that, the year to year takes care of itself. And that it's in those private moments that just always ask you, are you living up to my sense of honor? Am I living up to kindness and decency? Am I just being good? Now, I've stumbled, I've made horrible mistakes in my personal life, but I try to focus on just goodness. And a lot of our great leaders, I love that Ben Franklin literally kept a journal. I've got my journal, just so to speak, happens to be right in front of me, and would just keep notes. He would actually pick one of our great virtues, and just for a period of time, just focus, am I living this virtue? And that virtue could have been kindness, honesty, whatever. And so I just want to say to everybody, if I could go back to myself, I would say, be as disciplined as you can in living in accordance to your virtues, not in your big speeches and the things but in your personal life, in your day-to-day interactions with every human being. Because every moment of your life is a chance for you to generate energy and spirit that multiplies itself. Heck, there's a Stanford researcher that's been able to document just a small good deed, picking up a piece of trash that's witnessed by other people on that sidewalk will affect their behavior. And that's actually, to me, what I've found. I've come all around the world. Like there's a great, I think it's an East Asian story about a guy who spent 10 years trying to change the world, failed. And so he spent the next 10 years trying to change his country, failed. Then he spent the next 10 years trying to change his city, failed. Then finally he spent 10 years just trying to change himself, and the world changed. And so my hope is for all of us is that we pay attention to ourselves and being the change we want to see in the world, as Gandhi would say.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you so much for being part of the 3rd annual Mid-Atlantic Political Intern Summit, MAPIS2020, through this capstone conversation. It's been an honor, sir. I just want to, as we conclude the day's activities, I just want to thank all of our student volunteers, as well as my wonderful colleague at RIPPAC, Teresa Gauthier, for their help in making today possible. And for those watching, thank you for being part of this historic program. We look forward to seeing all of you at next year's Mid-Atlantic Political Intern Summit on Thursday, August 5th, 2021. God willing, we'll be able to do it all in person at Rowan University. Until then, enjoy the rest of the summer and be safe. Senator, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Much love and gratitude for this opportunity to talk with you. And I hope to see you when we're not so socially distanced sometime.
When we're not so socially distanced.
All right. Bye-bye.